want to talk about how great leaders, not just good leaders, great leaders have high emotional intelligence. Maybe you don't know much about the field. Maybe you've never thought much about it. Maybe you haven't heard about it talked about in church, but the Bible is filled with stories and instances of emotional intelligence. What does that mean? Here's an example. When I was growing up, I think most of you know, I grew up in the West African country of Liberia. And my father, before moving there, he had been in business in the Silicon Valley. He was a successful entrepreneur. He was a president of Rotary. And he had been a lieutenant in the Navy in World War II. So business is business. When you're taking care of business, you take care of business. In Liberia, though, Liberians are extremely gregarious, extremely friendly. People come first. They're a people-oriented culture. Anyway, he didn't really know much about that when we first moved there. I remember we hadn't been there long, and I'm with my dad hanging out, just following him around the capital city, Monrovia. He was taking care of business, and we go into a government office, and he walks up to the receptionist, and she has her head down, and she's typing, and he says, I'm here to see Mr. Dolo. Well, he says that, and she just keeps typing. She doesn't look up. So he says, again, excuse me, can you tell Mr. Dolo that Reverend Chinchen is here to see him? And she doesn't look up. She just keeps typing. And now he's getting a little annoyed because, it's clearly she can hear him and she's not acknowledging him. He says, excuse me, ma'am, can you go get Mr. Dolo for me? She doesn't respond. And just a moment later, she slowly looks up and she says, Reverend Chinchen, can you not say good morning first? And that's Liberians. You see, in Liberia, if you come up to somebody and you greet and you meet them, you say, how's your body keeping? How's your ma? How's your pa? Any good news? Any bad news? And you have that conversation first before you say, is Mr. Dolo in? If you walk into a room and there's even like a medical waiting office, you go around the room and you greet every person in the room. You shake their hand one at a time. That's how Liberians function. Liberians have in my opinion, high emotional intelligence. As Westerners, Americans, maybe it's something we need to work on. So what is emotional intelligence? The phrase was first used and coined by a couple of researchers. One, his name is John Mayer. No, not the musician John Mayer. And in 1990, they write an article titled Emotional Intelligence. And they write about how we can be more aware, self-aware of our own feelings and how what we're feeling emotionally affects others around us. So I have a definition here. Emotional intelligence involves the ability to be aware of and monitor one's own and others' feelings and emotions and use this information to guide your thinking and your action. You see, the old school of business, like the school of business my father grew up in, said, leave your emotions at the door. When you get to work, leave there's no crying in baseball, right? Just leave your emotions at the door. But now, great leaders, business thinkers are realizing that how we perform, how we work, how we lead a team, it has a lot to do with how you feel. You can't separate your feelings and your emotions from how you act and behave as a leader. So like I said, the Bible is filled with examples of emotional intelligence. When you open the first couple of pages of the Bible, we read about God coming down, God himself coming down into the Garden of Eden. And he's looking for Adam and Eve. And he says to them, why are you hiding? He knows that they are in shame. He sees this emotion of shame and they're hiding, so he calls them out on it. If you keep reading in the Bible, you come to the wisdom books, and you have like David in the wisdom books, and he says brilliant things like this. He asks his own soul a question. He says, my soul, why are you so downcast? In other words, what has me down today? Why am I depressed? And so David is wrestling with his own emotions. That's emotional intelligence. Jesus in the New Testament time and time again is reading the emotions of people around him. Even when he rises from the dead, he sees Mary. The first person he meets is Mary. And he says, Mary, why are you crying? He's reading her emotions. Jesus had very high emotional intelligence. So our text today comes from John chapter 13. And we have this great story about Jesus, especially coming into Easter, where we see Jesus reading the room. He's reading the emotions of his disciples that are sitting at dinner with him. So follow along, John chapter 13. Jesus was troubled in the spirit. This is in the middle of dinner, by the way, and testified, very truly, I tell you, that one of you at this table is going to betray me. So he accuses everybody. They're sitting there. His disciples stared at one another, at a loss to know which one of them he meant. One of them, the disciple who Jesus loved, we know this is John, was reclining next to him. And Simon Peter motioned to this disciple and said, ask him which one he means. Now we have to read this passage in context. Peter doesn't shout out to the whole table, hey, ask him who it is. He just kind of motions to his buddy John, hey, you're next to him, ask him which one. Let's find out who this person is. Now Peter, we know, is an ear cutter. I think when Peter finds out who it is, he's going to cut off his ear or the whole neck, the whole head maybe, I don't know. So leaning back, John leans back against Jesus and he asks him, Lord, who is it? Now, you have to read this right. This is a whisper. He's not announcing to the table, hey, Jesus, who is it? He doesn't say call him out. He whispers, who is it? And Jesus answered. And maybe it was a nonverbal answer. He says, the one, he takes a piece of bread. He says, the one I give this piece of bread to. Then dipping the piece of bread, he gave it to Judas. As soon as Judas took the bread, Satan entered him. So Jesus told him, what you are about to do, go and do quickly. No one at the meal, so all of this was very discreet, subversive, right? Because no one at the meal understood why Jesus said this to him. As soon as Judas had taken the bread, he went out and it was night. Do you see why I said Jesus had very high emotional intelligence? He's reading his disciples' mood at the table. He knows that John is a safe person. He can have this conversation with. He knows Peter is not safe. He knows what's going on in Judas's mind. He knows that Judas doesn't even want to be at the table. Well, when you talk about emotional intelligence, there are 4 core competencies, 4 aspects to emotional intelligence. So I want to unpack those today, and maybe you take away something home. I hope that becomes of value to you. The first one is this, is that leaders learn to be self-aware. It's simply termed self-awareness. This means to be aware of your own emotions. Good leaders, great leaders, learn to be aware of their own emotions. It's the ability to understand your own mood, your own tendencies, your own motives, your actions, and know why you're doing things. In surveys that have been done, 95% of people who are surveyed say that, yes, I have high self-awareness. So most of you, if I ask, are you self-aware? You'd say, yes, I am. The truth is, only about 15% of people are actually self-aware. So this is really something that all of us here need to work on. In Matthew 7, Jesus says something brilliant. He says this, he says, why do you? And he's talking about our self-awareness here. He says, why do you look at the speck of sawdust in someone else's eye and pay no attention to your own eye? In other words, you are not self-aware. He says, how can you say, let me take the speck out of your eye, when all the time there's a blank in your own eye? What is Jesus talking about? He's saying, we can be more self-aware. You hypocrite, first take the plank out of your own eye, and then you'll see clearly to remove the speck from the other person's eye. I think when we are young, we don't understand emotional intelligence well. I know that because that's the case in my own life. We aren't even really aware of our own emotions, let alone someone else's. One of my first jobs I got when I was a senior in college and needed some income is I got a job as a PE teacher. I thought I was an athlete. That's why I applied for the job. And so at a small Christian elementary and junior high school. And so one afternoon I'm teaching PE and it's near the end of the hour. It's the last period of the day. And some 5th grader, I think if I remember right, his name was Joey. And you don't know Joey, so it's okay. And Joey was lipping off to me. So I said, Joey, go run some laps. And Joey's sweating and running. I can see he's about to cry. But I knew that laps build character. So I had him do just a bunch of laps. I can't remember if it's 5 or 10 or how many. But he was running, while he's running laps, the bell rings, all right? And school's out. So he leaves. I don't pay much attention to him leaving. 3 minutes later, I see his dad coming. And his dad's coming with a dad walk. You seen the mad dad walk? All right. His dad, I could read the room. His dad was not happy. And he's stomping him. He, picked him up after work. He's in a suit and tie, and he's got the dad walk coming right at me. So as the mature 21-year-old that I was, as he's coming toward me, I could see he's mad. Now, his anger made me angry. Like, why are you coming at me with this attitude? So when he's about 20 feet away, I say to this grown man, I say, hey, you got a problem? That's what I said. And that always helps, doesn't it? And he comes right back at me and he says, yeah, you. That's what he says. And just the whole thing just spiraled after that. I'm lucky I didn't get punched that day because I was such a punk, just a punk. You got a problem. Yeah, because as 21-year-olds, we're not that self-aware. But now you're a grown man and woman right now. But some of us still behave like that, or at least in our heart we feel that. And my challenge to you is to begin asking yourself the question, why do I feel this? Why? This person's coming out, why do I feel mad? And then try to back off and understand it. So Josh Havens, who leads our worship here, now his wife is a counselor, so he's a wealth of counseling information. And he showed me, I got to show you this emotional feelings wheel that he showed me this week. And it describes. You see, so often we have very few words to talk about our emotions. We say, I'm mad, or I'm angry, or I'm happy. But really, there are sub-emotions. For example, the red, of course, is anger. The orange is pride, or being proud. The yellow on the top right is joyful. And look at those subcategories, which are really helpful. When you're joyful, you're feeling happy, or you're feeling excited or ecstatic or generous. Do you see how those words help describe those feelings better? Anger is a secondary emotion. We get angry because we feel embarrassed or ashamed. Do you see how those are secondary emotions? So anyway, maybe take a picture of this. It's small print. Good luck reading that. But snap it with your phone or find it, and I think it will be helpful. All right, here's a second core competency when we talk about emotional awareness, is that leaders manage their emotions. So it's one thing to be aware of your emotions, what you're feeling, whether it's good or bad. It's a second thing to manage those emotions. Because when you don't manage your emotions, then you end up saying things like, you got a problem, when you don't manage them. Jesus, I love in this story that we read in John chapter 13, he's not just managing his emotions, he's also managing the emotions of everyone in the room. But first of all, if I'm Jesus, and I know that this guy Judas is going to betray me, there's no way I could hold that in. But Jesus, and we know that Jesus had the ability to get angry, right? Remember, he flipped tables and took a whip and went after some people. So Jesus could get angry, but instead he stays extremely calm. I would have been saying, hey, Judas, this is the Benedict Arnold. I would have called him out. I would have said, Ute Brute, or I would have said something like, hey, this is Tyreek Hill. He just left KC for Miami for measly $120 million. But I would have called out Judas. I would have turned everyone against him. But wise, good, great leaders learn to regulate their emotions. Look at what we read in Proverbs 29. The wise King Solomon says, fools give full vent to their rage, but the wise bring calm in the end. Self-regulation, or self-management, like we have on the screen, or self-regulation, is the ability to control your disruptive impulses. Because you often will have an impulse. You want to react. You want to blurt out something. Self-management means that now you've learned to recognize that emotion and just hold it down for a bit until it becomes more productive. I don't know if you've watched someone give, as Solomon says here, fools give full vent to their rage. Have you ever watched someone give full vent to their rage? It usually happens on airplanes or in post offices. That's usually where it happens. Maybe you've been that person that has given full vent to your rage. There's always There's always people that are damaged, relationships that are hurt when you give full vent to your rage. Nothing ever good, think about it, ever comes out of not regulating, not controlling, not managing your emotions. It always goes south. Every year at the Grove out here on the field, we have a turkey bowl and at Thanksgiving. And we have like more than 100 athletes show up to play in it. And every year, I give the same speech. I get up in front of the 100 guys, and before we pray at the start of it, I say, now listen, guys, you're athletes and you're competitors. I know that. But I need you to keep your anger in check today, all right? I said, so today, there's no cussing. A, you're at a church, all right? B, it's Thanksgiving. And the second thing is, there's no taking punches. There's no swinging at anybody. There's no getting in a fist fight. I said, if you lose your temper today, you will regret it the rest of your Thanksgiving. You're going to ruin your own Thanksgiving if you lose your temper because you'll be embarrassed. You'll be ashamed of the way you behave today. And most of the time they listen, and most of the time it goes fine. But isn't that true? That when we don't regulate our emotions, we lash out at people, we say things off the cuff, we say things that are hurtful that we haven't taken time to think about, and there's always collateral damage. Galatians 5, listen to this. Paul writes, the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. Self-control is a self-management word. It's the ability to control your emotions until you can respond in a calm and productive manner. That's what Paul is saying here. And this is so hard. If you're in a tense situation, I'll be honest with you, it's so hard. I read something this week about 90 seconds. I don't know if you know this. I didn't know much about this until recently, but when you encounter something that makes you afraid, for example, or makes you angry, your body releases chemicals. For 90 seconds, you feel that anger, or for 90 seconds, you feel that rage. Or it could be a positive emotion, but that feeling, that negative feeling, only lasts about 90 seconds. And if you can make it past that, you're probably going to answer the person with more calm, more dignity, more respectful, more godly, if you can just wait 90 seconds. You've told your kids, go count to 10 before you answer. No, maybe it should be count to 90 and tell yourself that. When a coworker says something really annoying and you're frustrated, you can't just lash out. You have to calm down. Anyone who is still angry after 90 seconds or still bitter after 90 seconds or still fearful after 90 seconds, it's because they have chosen to stay in that emotional loop. It's a choice. It's a decision. I'm going to remain bitter because of what they said. But you don't feel it anymore. You're making yourself do that. It's a very interesting thing. All right, here's a third core competency for leaders who have high EQ, high emotional intelligence, is that leaders pay attention to the emotions of others. It's termed social awareness. So it's one thing, it's very important to be aware of your own emotions, right? But now social awareness means that you are aware of the emotions of the people around you. Maybe you've heard the phrase, it's the ability to read the room, that you can tell from your co-workers or whoever you're working with what they're feeling in that day. I think Jesus shows us this great ability to read the room. He knows that Peter will react differently than John. He knows that Judas will react differently than the others. And so he's extremely aware. He knows he has the sons of thunder sitting at dinner. And so if he announces that Judas is the betrayer, they're all coming after Judas. So he's very aware of what's happening in the room. Social awareness is that ability to recognize the feelings and the emotions of your coworkers, of your teams. It's the ability to recognize the feelings and the emotions of your husband or your wife or your children, and then the ability to take that information and use it in a productive way in your organization, in your business, or in your family. One of the most helpful tools to me personally, and I think to a lot of our team at the Grove, is when we all collectively, a few years ago at the Grove, read Ian Cron's The Road Back to You. And if you don't have a copy of The Road Back to You, write it down, buy it on Amazon after the service is over, and hit buy on that. But The Road Back to You goes through the 9 Enneagram types. And Ian Cron is a pastor who writes on the Enneagram types, and it opened my eyes to understand how my coworkers ticked. It opened my eyes to what makes me tick. What are my hot buttons? What are my passions? So I have a brief summary here of the Enneagram. We're going to do, this is like the fastest 2 minutes in church, and I want to take you through the Enneagram types. And if you haven't understood who you are, I invite you to dig into it, spend the $22 at the Enneagram Institute online, and take their test. It's extremely valuable. So for every Enneagram type, personality type, there are strengths, and then all of us there's a healthy you, and then there's an unhealthy you. Maybe you don't know this, but there is an unhealthy version of all of us. There's an unhealthy version of me. All right, strengths for the perfectionist or the reformer is they are dependable, they're conscientious, they're precise. But their weakness is that they can become resentful. They can become overly critical. They can become angry. They're in the gut triad or the anger triad. And Enneagrams 1, 8s, and what's the other one? 8s and 9s. Watch out because they can get angry. All right, number 2 is the helper. Their strengths is that they are caring and generous. They have a propensity to serve others well. Their weaknesses when they're unhealthy is that they become people pleasers and dependent on others. The achiever have great strengths. They're successful, energetic. They're high performers, high achievers. But their weaknesses is that they can be overwork themselves because they feel pressure to perform. The 4, the artist. The artist is a creative, or the individualist they have emotional depth. They have high EQ. Their weaknesses, they can be moody, withdrawn, even uncooperative. The investigator. Their strengths they love to read. They love to study. They are very self-reliant. But then the investigator, their weaknesses, they can become isolated and overly technical. 6, the loyalists, they are clearly loyal. They are attentive to other people and their needs and their problems. Their weaknesses, though, is that they can become pessimistic and anxious and suspicious and have a lot of doubt in their lives. 6s need to be aware. 7s love life. Life is an adventure. They're optimistic and spontaneous. Their weakness, however, when they're unhealthy, is that they will ignore everything that's negative. They can be scattered leaders. They need to work on that. 8s they are the challenger. The challenger strengths they want justice. They are generous. They take charge. They are confident. But then the challengers have to be careful because they can easily become bossy. They're angry. They're in the anger triad, and they can be dominating. I have tested as an 8 with a 7 wing. I have to watch those things myself. All right, I got to be honest. Peacemakers. Peacemakers I love them. They're peaceful people. They're easygoing, welcoming. They include others. But then their weaknesses, they can procrastinate. They can be stubborn. So I don't know where you land in that, or where your spouse is, or where your coworkers are. I'll tell you right now, this is one of the most helpful tools that I have found in the workplace to understand myself and my coworkers here at the Grove. When we talk about social awareness, when we talk about the idea of being aware of people around you, there's a key word that goes with it. And write this down if you're writing anything down. And the word is empathy. So empathy is different than sympathy. So when I sympathize with someone, it just means, oh, I'm so sorry you feel that. To empathize means I can put myself in their shoes. I can try to feel what they are feeling. When you sense that someone is feeling bad or depressed or discouraged, let me ask you this. How do you approach them? Do you ask about those things? When you're socially aware, you are very aware of what someone else is encountering. People with high emotional awareness are able to put themselves, empathize in someone else's shoes. For example, here at the Grove, Matt Shively leads our Grove Counseling Ministry, and he's brilliant at it. And we have an incredible team of counselors here. And sometimes I'll be in meetings with Matt, and I'll share something that someone did or said that frustrated me. And I'll say, Matt, I need to tell you this. This person said this, or this person did that. And he'll sit there, and he'll take it in, and he'll think about it, and he'll say, Palmer, I think I can see why they said that or did that. I think I understand. I'm like, no, I can't see that. I can't understand. Why? I'll tell him, why are you on their side? He said, I'm not on their side. I can just see what their point is. They have a point. And I'm like, no, they don't have a point. I'm trying to get better at this. I'm trying to understand people like Matt does, but it's a skill that all of us as leaders need to acquire, to be able to put ourselves in someone else's shoes so that you can see how their work is from their perspective, what their role is like from their perspective. This is for coworkers, for spouses, for your kids, whatever it is. Leaders who master empathy, they say, perform at 40% higher at all levels of work than people who don't have emotional intelligence. The best people in sales are very socially aware. They're very aware of the room. People who know sales, when they walk into their client's office or showroom, they pause. They take a pulse of the room because they know, is this a day when I pitch my product? Or is this a day when I just listen to my client, when I ask about their marriage or their kids who are in T-ball or in gymnastics or whatever it is? Salespeople are very aware of this. All right, one last core competency I want to share with you this morning regarding emotional intelligence, and it's that leaders manage with empathy. Some call this, I have relationship management here, and it's the ability to manage the conflict in your office or with your coworkers. It's not just being aware of what's happening in your coworkers or your family's lives, but it's actually now managing that so that your team is more healthy, your workplace is more healthy, your family is more healthy. Great leaders manage the environment because of what they are aware of. I'll share an example from this week in the NCAA tournament. So Coach K, I think you pronounce his name, Krzyzewski, okay, something like, but anyway, Coach K, he's been coaching at Duke since 1980, okay? That's a long time. He's maybe one of the most successful coaches ever in the history of NCAA basketball. And so this week, on Thursday night, they're playing Texas Tech, and Texas Tech takes the lead. And Texas Tech has these big, strong players, and they're beating down the Duke players inside. They're shoving them out. They're coming in the lane strong, and Duke is losing. So at about the 15-minute mark, and Coach K is asked about this afterwards, how did you win the game? And he said, about the 15-minute mark, I knew we were getting beat up on the inside, so I called a timeout. And he said, I told my team, I said, we're going to go to a zone. And he said, we'd never play a zone. We played zone like once or twice the entire season. We always play man-to-man. He said, but we're going to a zone. We're going to shut down the key. We're going to make them beat us from the outside. And so they go into a zone at halftime. Duke barely has a lead, 1 or 2 points. They go into the second half. They're still playing zone. They barely have a lead. About 5 minutes into the second half, Coach K calls a timeout. He said, my players came to me all at once in unison. He said they sounded like a Catholic boys choir. That's what he said. And all his players said, Coach, please let us go back into man-on-man, the zone. We can beat them, Coach. Let us go back. We know man-on-man better. We know we're better than these guys. Let us go man-on-man. And Coach K said, so I listened to them. This is maybe the most brilliant coach in basketball, but he says, I listened to them. He said, I realized they were going to fight for this. If I wouldn't let them play the defense they wanted to, they would fight even harder. So I said, okay, we're going back to a man-to-man. And they won the game. That's a brilliant coach. You see, and that happens in all aspects of leadership, is that great leaders, good leaders, they read the room, and then they manage the people that they're working with based on what they know. We see Jesus do this in this meal. He turns to Judas, and he says, Judas, maybe you should leave now. You know, I can tell you don't want to be here right now. So he gets him out of the room, and he's managing the environment. Leaders, good leaders, use their information like that. I want to share with you one last list before we go, and it's the skills of relationship management. And I read this list recently, and I thought, man, I have to share this with you at the Grove. And so follow with me here. So this is practicing some of the relationship management skills. 1, pay attention. Pay complete, undivided attention to every individual you communicate with. Listen as if your life depended on it. Don't interrupt. Pause after you ask a question and after they ask a question. Ask another related question. Don't shift the topic to yourself, which we all do. All right, next one. When you're in the presence of others, put the phone away. Turn it off, please. Paying attention to your phone instead of the person in front of you is the ultimate insult. Gosh, that's so good. Being 5 minutes early is on time. Showing up late shows a lack of respect. All right, that's true. Treat everyone you come into contact with as the most important person in the world. Be selfless, curious, and grateful. Emailed thank you notes are not acceptable for most things worth saying thank you for. Get a nice pen and your own stationery and lots of stamps. For everyone under 30, at this place called the post office, they sell stamps. You put it on, anyway, you'll figure it out. Be obsessively interested in other people. Ask questions. Find out how you can help them. Follow up and stay in touch. Always ask for what you want in all areas of your life. Don't just wish, ask. Few things will ever be outright given to you without you initiating first. Last one. Smile more, you will feel better, and others react to you better. All right, just a few final thoughts on being relationally aware and using that. All right, I want to invite up 2 brilliant young business leaders here to the Grove, Gil and Manny Sandoval. Can we welcome them up this morning? So Gil and Manny first moved to the Phoenix area here from La Mirada, California, because they had a band named Safe Haven, and Paul Gunther on our staff said, if you move here, we'll release an album, and you did.
Correct.
And it happened.
Yes, that did happen. That is true.
And then Gil and Manny also worked here at the Grove with us, running our social media, our website, helping us get the name of the Grove out there. And then a few years ago, they launched their own business, Sandoval Design. Well, good to sit down with you guys here. So here you have and I invited them up today because now they just don't lead an advertising agency. They are filmmakers, and they have a brilliant new film coming out called A Case for Heaven. So we're going to talk about that. But first, Gil and Manny, as you started your business, and we talk about personality types in the Enneagram, what did you have to learn about each other to work together? Because most brothers in business, I think somebody wouldn't make it the first week.
Yeah, it's true. We actually get asked that a lot because, going through the band days and always kind of being together, how do you work with your brother? And to be honest, the truth is, number one, we were raised this way. Our father just raised us together and with the importance of unity, et cetera, et cetera. But second of all, really what it is for me and for us was not only just looking at Manny as my brother and what he needs to quote unquote change or be in order for me to be okay with this, but honestly looking at myself and seeing what do I need to change? What are the parts of me that I need to change in order for me to bring my best self to this relationship? And both of us assuming best intent in one another, it has been paramount for us.
Well, I've watched that happen over the years, and I'm proud of the way you guys have grown as leaders and grown your business. It's impressive.
Thank you.
And now, Manny, you have a feature-length film, The Case for Heaven. Tell us how you've transitioned from not just being an advertising agency, but to also releasing films and being filmmakers.
Well, thanks for having us, Palmer. Thank you to the church as well. And just so you guys know, when I worked here, I was doing video. So kudos to the video team for so much that they've accomplished.
Yeah. Thank you.
And, this is all a dream. This is all, in Spanish, the word is locura. Like, I can't believe it.
Locura.
Our parents came from a Guatemala immigrant family. We were raised in South Central LA. So this was impossible for us. Yeah. So through the business and through what we started, we got to meet a man named Lee Strobel. He wrote the book, The Case for Christ, and it was also a movie. So through that, our company marketed his book. Okay. So then I got to have dinner with Lee, and what I started realizing was I really admired him. But I started realizing why I admired him was a lot of his just dedication to the faith, but also he introduced something that I didn't know about. It was called apologetics. And apologetics, what it does, it's technically the defense of the faith, but it's not a debate. It's truly how do we articulate what it is that we believe. Right. So being a Christian my whole life, I was actually kind of a little embarrassed and ashamed that I didn't know a lot of these things. And then when the case for heaven subject matter came up, I was like, whoa, there's a lot of things about heaven that we don't know about. Yeah. And as a Christian, I've been a Christian my whole life, I was a little ashamed. I was embarrassed. I was like, if I don't know this, I'm sure there's a lot of other people that might not. So we need to do this film.
Well, we all need to see it, I think, Manny. That's great. So, Gil, give us a little teaser, maybe even a spoiler. What should we be looking forward to?
All right, I'm going to try not to give it away because I have the director sitting right next to me. But
I'll call Mom after.
one of my favorite parts was I received a phone call from Manny, and he said, I want to interview Francis Chan. I want to get Francis Chan to interview. And my first response was like, cool, let me know how that goes, good luck. And he, long story short, he emailed Francis Chan's people. And
but hang on, he wanted to interview Francis Chan.
Interview Francis, yes, you're right. He wanted to interview Francis Chan, and then he said, I want to interview him in a cemetery.
In a cemetery, yeah.
And
that's
I want to talk about
exciting.
his mother that passed away in the cemetery where she's buried. And I said, not a good idea. I don't think you should do that. That's not. I don't know if that's right. And Manny, in very Manny fashion, goes ahead and says, "I'm going to do it anyway. I'll let you know how it goes." Emails Francis Chan's people. They obviously say no. They're like, "No, that's not. Thank you very much. We don't want to do that." And Manny, again in Manny fashion, goes ahead and emails him our teaser trailer, right? The first trailer that we had, and says, "Well, first look at this, and then if you change your mind, let me know." And they emailed immediately, said, Francis Chan wants to do this.
Wow.
He wants to do this with you. And I was like, are you still going to do the cemetery thing? Because that does not sound like a good idea. And long story short, the first time I saw that segment in the film, it gave me goosebumps. I mean, it brought me to tears thinking, like, Francis Chan doing what Francis Chan does in a cemetery, looking at his mother's grave, talking about death. And it just, I'm not going to say more than that, but it really is something special and something different that we don't typically see or talk about. So it's really cool to see it come to life.
That's powerful, Gil. Yeah. That's powerful. All right, so Manny, why should not just every person at the Grove, but why should every Christian see this and invite maybe a seeking neighbor or friend or coworker to go with them?
Yeah, I think because the film welcomes the resistance. It welcomes the hard questions. And I think a lot of us, even Christians or non, have questions about the goodness of God, suffering, what happens after we die, how do we confront that, right? So I think what the film does, in my opinion, it opens the door to our homes to create the conversation piece that we can bring folks into our homes, people who have had a rough relationship with their spouse or their friend or someone that you really love, and there's conflict because you just can't explain what it is that you believe and you want them to understand. It's like that song, right, that explains the way you feel, but they just did it. And I think that film bridges the gap between the mind and the heart of how we come to faith. And talking about personalities, all of us have all these unique experiences and our operating systems, but the truth remains the same. Heaven exists, and I think there's evidence here that you can believe rationally, because our faith is not wishful thinking, but you can also feel it and experience it. Okay. So I believe this film, I think I would encourage all of us to take a spiritual risk. I challenge you, bring someone that needs to hear this message. Our promise is that we don't put anything out that hasn't touched us, because how could it move someone if it doesn't move us? And I'll end with this personal tie with our parents. My mother took that spiritual risk, and we wouldn't be here today. We wouldn't have been able to do this movie if my mother had not, stuck with it, prayed for our father, and she took that spiritual risk, and heaven came into his heart and changed his life.
All right, thank you, Manny and Gil. Well, everybody wants to see the trailer. Can we watch it?
Absolutely.
All right, let's hit play.
10 years ago, I almost died. As I hovered between life and death, nothing was more important than what happens when I close my eyes for the last time in this world.
I was there when you looked up into the night.
I think the fear of death drives a lot of our lives.
Do we have a soul that survives our physical demise? Can near-death experiences tell us anything reliable about life after death? And why should we trust what Jesus tells us about heaven and about hell? It was the most ambitious investigation of my life, perhaps my final chapter.
Let me wipe your tears away.
This is my case for heaven.
Jesús dice, yo soy el camino, la verdad y la vida.
They are trying to find some way to live on beyond their death. They're running out of time.
The whole point of the resurrection is that I wouldn't have to fear it in a sense of, oh no, what's going to happen next?
I didn't really care whether I was going to heaven or hell.
I have absolutely no idea what happens after we die.
There's something that it is to be us. There's something that it is like to be you.
When we die, we leave our natural bodies, but we're still ourselves. It's life on steroids. It's life beyond anything we've experienced.
Don't wait like I did until I was on the verge of death to begin to consider what happens after I die.
The evidence is out there. The facts can be found. Keep seeking. The truth is out there.